Коллеги, добрый день. Начнем наш доклад. Так, ага, спасибо.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Let's begin our presentation.
Он
Thank
будет
you.
очень позитивным, потому что он больше про то,
Hope it will be
верить.
positively perceived, because I think my presentation is about believing in what you do and believing that, doing good things give good results.
Затащили наш консенсус
We'll talk
ванильную фабрику.
about our consensus mechanism into vanilla fabric.
Были этим вознаграждены.
And
Давайте сначала
we're rewarded for it. So let's introduce myself.
организацию, от которой
The company I work for is
название. Если к ней
the
добавить
Center for
надо еще правильно говорить, что это
Perspective
некоммерческая организация.
Interdisciplinary Research Idea. It's a non-commercial R&D and startup
Наукоемких исследований, там очень много что есть. И
playground for
физического она при физтехе, внутри
scientific research. It's within MIPT. It has IT department, which has in turn the blockchain team, and we run open research for the blockchain community. Let's talk about Fabric.
Hyperledger
For those who don't know,
Foundation,
Hyperledger Foundation, a very well-known open
проект по разработке
ecosystem project developed for the corporate blockchains.
продуктов
Fabric is one of its
для того, чтобы его
products,
не путать
and in order not to mix them up with
среди остальных, его вот так вот двумя
the
словами
others,
называют.
it's usually called
Фабрик.
Hyperledger
Есть
Fabric.
ощущение, что когда фреймворк
We think that when
развивался, самое главное, для чего
it was developing,
заводили разные сущности, нужно
the
было
main
отличаться
thing
от публичных
why
блокчейнов.
it was created is to be different from the public blockchain. And
Сущности
well-known entities
фабрика названы иначе.
inside Fabric
Заметьте,
is
кстати, что даже
called differently.
когда мы говорим про правовое поле,
Even if we talk about the legislation, about the legal aspects of using blockchain in Russia, you can notice that the term
распределенный реестр, а
distributed ledger is used rather than blockchain.
из специфики фабрики можно выделить, что
And that's hence the reason for different names. And the specifics is that it has closed joints
защиты
and complex crypto protection system.
работы с фреймворком.
The complexity lies in the amount of crypto artifacts that you need for protection. It has a separate procedure for endorsing and ordering. This is platform specifics. And you can also note that despite the environment being closed, it's not fully trusted. So the consensus is important here.
Оговорим еще, что фабрика использует принципиально разные типы узлов.
Also, the Fabric is using different types of nodes. We will need that as legend for our next slides.
Между прочим, в исходной литературе
By the way,
фабрики их называли peering node и ordering
the
node,
original
но
literature calls this peering nodes and ordering nodes,
отказались
but the node
в практике, да, чтобы
was-
опять же отмежеваться от
has not gone into practice to be different from the public blockchains. We don't have nodes, we have peers, we have orders.
первый
Orders.
забег на прохождение транзакции.
First attempt for the transaction
Не будем пока что важно отметить следующее.
here.
Что у нас
Let's not dive too deep,
актором всех действий
but
является
just notice two
клиентское
things.
приложение,
The actor is the client
которое,
application
чтобы сделать фабрики,
that in order to create
делает запрос на
changes in the fabric,
это клиентское приложение.
creates a call for transaction. It's a client's application. Task
Узлы пир,
calls the
каждый из
nodes,
которых,
peers,
делая честные вычисления,
and each of them, by doing
приложение. И потом
honest calculations, would check the application,
это дело на
and then it's the client's
ordering сервис.
task to
Здесь он пока у
send
нас
this
представлен
to the ordering
для этого
service.
кластера. Вот
Here it's represented by some cluster,
делает проверку
And the ordering service
политик и формирует блок,
will check the policies and create the block
зашивается в
that
блокчейн.
will become part of the blockchain.
История по верхам, нам это тоже будет достаточно
Just
важно. Такие
main part of the story here.
известные всем так.
Three stages. First of all,
энтузиазм,
the
IBM,
spring of crypto enthusiasm. IBM is one of the
ванильной фабрики с
developers
точки зрения
for the Vanilla Fabric
контрибьютинга.
in terms of contribution.
И внутри IBM
And
также
that's
разрабатывается
inside IBM.
программная библиотека Smart BFT Go. Это
There's a library, Smart BFT Go,
протокол.
being created
Уже на этом этапе
to implement the Smart BFT protocol.
заказчиком некоторых
At
принципиальных
this stage,
изменений. То есть
Scientific Center, ID Scientific Center, my organization,
своими силами эту работу не ведет, это ведет IBM Research.
participates in this, but it's mostly conducted by IBM Research. And we have the second stage with IBM leaving the project, and the idea becomes the owner of the rights for Smart BFT and supports the Fabric fork, because Vanilla Fabric does not want the BFTs there.
консенсусами. Ну и
They play CFT consensus.
это также совпадает с некоторым общим
And
замедлением.
this coincides with the overall slowdown in the industry.
Третий этап, собственно, наше достижение.
And the third stage
Smart BFT
is our main achievement, that Smart BFT is now part, accepted in Hyperledger Labs,
включением BFT
and Vanilla Fabric is supposed to
базовой реализации.
go with Smart BFT consensus as basic implementation. So we will be talking mostly about the second stage, where the developers of the Idea Center started working with both BFT consensus
BFT.
and BFT fork support.
Чуть про консенсусы, чтобы было ясно
Couple of words about the consensus,
глубокую веру в BFT.
just to give you an idea of how we started to believe deeply in
Консенсус — это
BFT.
механизм либо там достижения доверия.
Consensus is a mechanism to achieve trust or prevent distrust
накладывается
in
5
some areas.
базовых задач
It has
или целей.
5 main goals, or asks,
От консенсуса, помимо, собственно,
and it's important for us that besides
обеспечения экономики
consensus and providing trust in public blockchains,
задача обработки отказов. То есть
we also need to process
должен включать
denials of service.
обеспечение
Process needs to have continuity as part of it.
Консенсусы можно разделить, одна из классификаций, на два
The
больших
consensus can be classified into two big families:
византийским атакам. Я
resilient
не буду
to
раскрывать сейчас
denial of service and resilient to Byzantine attacks.
византийская задача, там,
I
уверен,
think you know what the
важно только
Byzantine
понимать,
task is.
что под словом византийский
But it's important that by saying Byzantine, we
нету доверия.
mean the node that is not trusted for some reason.
Мог быть скомпрометирован.
Doesn't matter why.
Может, он просто
Maybe
не очень
because
нравится.
it's compromised, maybe we just don't like it.
Есть некая вероятность, что узлы, участвующие в
But we have some probability
могут это делать
that
не
the
так.
nodes participating in the consensus would not
Помню
be
еще раз,
playing
что любой
fairly.
консенсус решает все 5 базовых
Let me remind you that any
задач,
consensus
и не
needs to
отображает,
solve
да, что,
5
скажем, если у нас
basic
BFT
tasks.
консенсус, он живучести не
This
достигает.
doesn't mean that
Речь идет именно о
BFT
приоритетах,
consensus
на
doesn't
которые
have
он направлен.
resilience.
Соответственно, устойчивость,
I'm just talking about the priorities.
прежде всего живучесть, может быть
So,
с некоторым ущербом
resilience is
того, как
achieved
он
by
обеспечивает устойчивость к
the
византийским атакам.
resistance to denials of service and through
Мы
the
с вами знаем, что если кто-то
resilience to Byzantine attacks.
может контролировать
And we know that if someone can control more
в
than
принципе, он может
half of the nodes in the proof of work consensus,
вот,
then he or she can command the network.
такой вот условный
That
кворум
is
может
why
половину узлов.
This
Для
type of
BFT
quorum
консенсуса необходим кворум.
works for half of the nodes. For BFT consensus, you need a quorum
Почему
from
от
2/3
если
of the nodes.
был бы
Why?
такой вопрос, ответ, что так в
Because
исследованиях на эту цифру как бы вышли в строгих математических
that was part of the research and mathematically proven. We think that 2/3 of the nodes, not less, should be constituting consensus. And it's important that for NFT, the principal decision is done by the leader, maybe someone who won the lottery, found the nonce, or in BFT consensus, quorum is
с точки зрения своего решения
the source of the consensus, despite having a leader.
Базовое отличие BFT консенсус. Давайте теперь непосредственно
The leader does not have any significant privileges.
немножко по
So let's look at the BFT.
важно, она нас постоянно
A couple of words about semantics. It will go with us. So
многозначность терминов очень мешает обычно. BFT или Smart BFT Go — это конкретная программная библиотека.
to define the terms, BFT or Smart BFT Go is a
Будем подразумевать именно это.
software library implementing Smart BFT. We will mean that,
Их
not the protocol family or not the type of protocol.
Фабрики.
We consider Smart BFT in its Fabric application.
Никто не
I'll tell you why in a little bit.
библиотеку для
You can, of course, use Smart BFT for some other Smart BFT consensus goals, but we will be talking about the fabric itself and about the goals that we set in implementing it. So Byzantine node is a non-trusted node. Maybe it's not definitely attacked. We suspect that something has happened with the node.
Важный момент про уровни и про семантику. Смотрите.
Very important point about the levels, the semantics.
Который мы
Smart BFT works on the ordering stage,
сформировать блок для того, чтобы его
and its goal is to create a block
консенсус как
added to the chain. The consensus as a process achieving those 5 goals works and achieves results on the whole
Поэтому
way, the whole route of the request.
говорим про библиотеку консенсуса, она работает на одном участке.
So when we talk about the consensus library, it works on one stage, but the consensus process, of course, is applicable to the whole transaction chain.
BFT.
So let's have a look at the specifics of BFT as part of the fabric.
Значит,
Once again,
это
the arrows
на которые
1 and 2 are the stages at which the client is ready to submit a transaction, formulates the request, and sends it to the peer nodes. An important point here is that he or she sends this request
на все, либо на нужные ему,
for a peer review or to the peers that he or she needs, and gathers some, registry of approvals. And the client motivation here is to get as many approvals as needed by the approval policy.
Клиент, опять же,
After getting those approvals, the client
транзакция была зашита в блок и поменяла состояние.
would wish for the transaction to be part of the block and change the ledger state.
Смотрите.
And here some specifics appears.
консенсусах,
In
напомню,
a non-BFT consensus, sending to something to ordering would mean some request to the leader or to
сам разберется, что с этим.
cluster that will decide what to do there. But the BFT consensus requires
Для того, чтобы
an explicit direction to a specific order, so that the ordering cluster would have the consensus inside of it.
Вот у нас более жирным выделен лидер.
The bold node is the leader, but the leader's approval or non-approval has no difference to all the other nodes. The leader needs for orchestration.
Что он делает?
And we will give some more details about his tasks.
Получил достаточное количество одобрений на стадии.
If the client is receiving enough approvals to registry and the ordering nodes agree that the transaction can be processed further, the block is formed, client is informed about it, and is being sent to the peer nodes to be added to the chain.
не клиент, да, здесь у нас он
It's important to know that this is done
больше для
not by the client.
подчеркивания.
The client is here just to highlight that
Мы
the client is
посмотрели,
informed.
значит,
So we had a look at the linear
развитие ситуации, как обычно
progression of events.
в системах, девал.
And as usual in such systems, the devil is in the details, and the important part is to how we process the
Первое,
corner
почему в
cases.
классическом
So
это PBFT
why
реализация,
smart? In
если
a classic
не
BFT
получилось,
implementation, if the leader
с его ролью, он там
fails for some reason,
или
something is broken,
большие задержки, то
or the legs are too high,
отправление
then before sending the transaction to the network,
перестроение
we
конфигурации
could not call the config rebuild and creation of a new leader. Smart protocol,
которых даже если
including the heartbeats, includes the heartbeats that even there are no transactions in the network is rebuilding, recreating itself. So when the transaction happens, it's ready for
что же делает лидер
the processing.
в Smart BFT протоколе? Лидер отвечает только за
In Smart BFT.
чтобы пакетирование транзакций происходило в одном месте и
The leader ensures that the packaging of the transactions is done in one place and all the nodes are processing one pack. An important part here is that the ordering system
внутри фабрики и
enables you to
на сеть один, и он
ensure that there are no forks appearing in the cluster.
формирование блоков в единицу времени. То есть если
And
не
there's
пакетируем
only one flow of block
транзакции, представьте
creation
себе, что была бы единая
in
очередь,
one point in time.
с которой, в общем,
Otherwise, that if we have one queue, the delays would be too long.
BFT
And when you work with Smart BFT,
при тестировании, при разработке, при
as part of the testing process and fork support, we caught a lot of
баланс
corner cases and issues.
возмущения,
The timeout balance and resilience processes were designed
и вывести
in a way that balances
конфигурацию. Вопрос реальной применимости
its use and makes it very easy.
Система.
Applicability is important for enterprise systems.
Прежде всего, мы работали с тулингом, даже
We worked with the tooling. Even Vanilla Fabric is not very well known for its tooling.
Что у нас в BFT консенсусе мы должны работать.
And in our BFT consensus, we should work with all the nodes in the same way. We don't have any preferences.
Конфигурационные изменения сети включают в себя те же самые
configuration changes.
Транзакции на ордеринг, да, которые там необходимы,
have the same ordering transactions.
чтобы сеть перестроилась, потому что конфигурация зашивается в конфигурационном блоке.
So that the config
И поэтому тулинг нужно было делать.
is part of the blockchain. So the tooling
То же самое с SDK для разных библиотек. Классический SDK предоставляет
is part of the blockchain. So the same
программным вызовом как
with the
API,
blockchain.
который можно отправить.
The interface provides the API
Магия дальше для клиента происходит.
that you can use to send the transaction to the network. All the magic is done under the hood, and the Vanilla Fabric SDK
То есть отсылал
works mostly with CFT approach,
на лидера, либо на ордеринг.
sending
И это не
the
поддерживает.
data to the leader or to the ordering.
С багами, работали
in
с
general.
использованием деплоя.
Of course, we worked with the bugs and with the deploy,
некоторой логики
and
в смарт-контракте.
with putting some part of the logic that is usually put in the smart contract into some off-chain application.
Как же мы попали в ванильную фабрику?
So some rigging. How did we get into the Vanilla Fabric?
Теперь на историю библиотеки. Она может быть созвучна с...
Let's have a look at the library history.
Этап первый. Smart BFT
It's probably
IBM Research в лаборатории,
goes along
в
the
том числе по заказу
IBM's history as analogies, and it's created as part of IBM research, and the idea center
владение Smart
takes the
библиотекой, ведет поддержку форка и ведет разработки в Smart
support of the fork and development.
года Smart BFT Go.
And in March 2024, Smart BFT Go is accepted into Hyperledger Labs.
Версии 3.
And the consensus is accepted into Vanilla Fabric Smart BFT 3.
Будучи в стороне, потому что на этапе 2 фабрика
So in this way,
консенсусами, мы в общем
because in the second stage the fabric worked with CFT consensus,
дошла
we achieved our
напомню, что на это
creation to work in the vanilla version.
и давит, да, то есть все это развитие
Let's see
происходит.
the pressures and the issues that we had in the process.
Мы застали общую ось
Those tough times,
энтузиазма к блокчейн-проектам.
we, of course, witnessed the autumn of cyber autumn and all those regulatory wars and the finalization of the work was done during the information war and toxic contract stage. Fortunately, this situation does not show any signs of improvement, and the mechanisms are very global and will keep happening. So why wouldn't we accept the CFT story and keep the fabric developing its CFT protocols? And we were enthusiastic, a little bit crazy in, working with CFT. So for people in the Fabric community that supported us, we very grateful. And first of all, the reason was that the environment is non-trusted. Corporate networks are usually set up in the mission-critical but not very much scalable situations. So if the lack of trust in the common blockchains can be reduced by the amount of users, in our case, in the corporate use, there's much less of them. So compromising some of the nodes would be harder to achieve.
Дальше смотрите, как интересно вообще Smart
and would be easier to mitigate. Look also at how Smart BFT has integrated into what we have. Imagine we work with CFT consensus. And on the validation stage for our requests with the peers, we go through the peers, we get those approvals from the nodes, whether it's correct or not, we send it to the CFT consensus that has much lower resilience. This makes the flow ideologically incorrect. That's why BFT is needed. Next point is that we would get real results, not only in Russia. First CFA point in Russia would have BFT consensus, and there were also implementations of BFT worldwide approved, but mostly they were closed because of the pressure that comes from the geopolitics, sanctions, and everything. So BFT story is okay with the regulators, and for the enterprise blockchain, it's important. Hence, we continued our work on the same attention zones that we mentioned. So never too much tooling for the real usage. We were improving the SDK, simplifying the deploy, and working on the fork. So we continued, and we were rewarded for our efforts. Vanilla version is a very mature version now. With BFT consensus, we are waiting for the release. So, specifically for us, besides all the surprise of approval. We have the community supporting us now, but that would take some resources. So the results for stories is a set of bullets. The third vanilla fabric having BFT consensus. Our developers are maintainers of Hyperledger. Smart CFT Go library is now, Smart BFT library is now part of Hyperledger Labs. Thanks much to the community that, despite all the pressure of the world, it did not preclude us from, and hopefully will not preclude us from working together. And I'm glad that the open community is active and Russian developers can still contribute to the worldwide technologies and be maintainers. And as soon as we delegated part of our work to Hyperledger Labs, we will have more resources to working with tooling, Uberization of our setups. There is there's a number of streams, both inside Hyperledger and outside, to develop the system, but we don't have the boxed solution, so we'll be working on that. And the Idea Center is also launching the test networks. We'll both have the code available for fast deployment of BFT setups. And we hope that we'll have a version Uberization, and we'll also have instances of test networks. We don't know what the conditions will be for joining them, the companies working with BFT environments. This would not be open, but I think it will be easy to join, like some agreement needed to, and then you will be able to run your contracts and applications in the environment. That's it. Thanks a lot, dear colleagues. Here are the contacts, and for those who used Telegram bot and ask us questions, we will be happy to answer them. Okay, let's try.
Так, Raft консенсус останется ли в HLF?
Will HLF still have Raft consensus?
Не интересовались.
Ilya, no idea. We never interested in that. I think it will stay. Whether it will stay in vanilla, I don't know.
То есть это будет некая история опциональная.
Most probably.
С Hyperledger же как бы базовая.
That will be an optional story. But the Hyperledger issue is that there are not enough resources. So we'll need to focus on this. Same goes for the SDK, because in the Hyperledger, no one is doing it. And we need to work with it. Can you confirm what are the goals for the consensus, for your consensus and for the CFT? Well, I think it has more to do with the demand for by the network, because for the corporate stories, for a small amount of participants that don't trust each other, they launch some important applications there, like digital currencies. BFT is extremely important because it prevents not only the malicious acts, but the node fails. What other blockchain technologies you have? Well, we have Karma project. As far as I know, it creates bridges to Ethereum, proof of concept development in terms of BFT consensus, more specific cases. Why am I not so competent about it is because just recently started to report on their results, and we didn't have time to, learn everything about them. But we have our Chainlink lab, and it's an open resource. Did you audit the Smart BFT? I think you mean the green certificates from a cybersecurity company, right? As far as I know, no. We don't have it certified. We've been certifying the specific setups because we have examples of our working networks being launched and, of course, being approved by some green flags from some audits from different regulators, but the BFT fabric specifically, no, and I'm not sure we're going to get it, because it's a serious story that needs a lot of work, and usually it's done by the specific project rather than by the technology itself. Requirements. How many validators do you need for the consensus? As a practical question, it boils down to 13 and more if it's used in the organization. Like my developer from the audience tells me for a minimal setup, for the multi-org organization and working setup, we would probably go to 12 or more. Can you apply your consensus to the public networks?
Я думаю, возможно, но здесь стоит вопрос, смотрите, требования к отказоустойчивости узлов.
The requirements for the node resilience become extremely hard, because in the proof of work consensus, you can turn off your node. The network did not suffer. You just did not get your reward. But our requirements for the validators, the requirements for the node are much higher. And second, this is about the scale, because the transaction processing in the fabric and ordering creates a bottleneck. And in some aspects, we are slower than the public blockchains in terms of performance. Maybe they are solving those issues better. R2 protocol, other approaches. So those fundamental questions are important. But overall applicability for the protocol is definitely possible. And the devil is in the details of the specific setup.
Какие недостатки BFT по сравнению с CFT можно выделить? Интересует, насколько тяжело
нода. The cons of the BFT.
Необходимость поддерживать.
I talked about it. The need to support specific number of validators for the quorum.
Желательно, чтобы сеть минимально
And it's important for the network to be quite consistent. So SLA is much higher than in CFT consensus. If you have a raft, and it ensures sustainability, that any node disappearing would relaunch the leader choice. In BFT, this is hard to be done. The client needs to hold some configuration in mind to ensure consensus, because it's his task to ask the nodes. So those are the main things. How bigger does the node get? Well, if you talk program like the code, then no big difference. There's research showing that on the live setups, the performance will be roughly the same as with CFT.
Вот. Но тяжелее становится тулинг, скорее, сторонний.
But the tooling becomes
специфические
a little bit tougher. It needs some specific approaches and implementations. So that is the area of complexity increase.
Реализация RAFT, например, она тоже...
But I can say that rough implementation is not very simple if we are talking about implementing it in the fabric.
Так, с вопросами все. Поскольку
That's it for the questions. And as the organizers are awarding the prize for the best question, and I need to have the honor of choosing the question, let's send the gift to Sergey SS for many questions and activity during the session. The winner can take the prize from the organizers. Thank you. Thank you very much.